Welcome to the very first Digging Deeper with Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd, and together we're going to dive into the biggest topics in Nebraska's gardening world. Today we discuss the devastating March floods, the lasting effect, and how Nebraskans are dealing with the cleanup effort. Early damage estimates resulting from the March 13th and 14th blizzard and flooding near $1.4 billion. The motto, "One state, one heartbeat," characterizes the entire state's sentiment and leads us into this discussion. So joining me today are Nebraska Extension educators John Wilson and Kathleen Kue. Thank you for being the very first on Digging Deeper, and I really appreciate your willingness to come and talk about this pretty critical issue. We want to focus really on flooded soils because that is the question that I know we're getting, and I think you are too in the counties. So, starting with perhaps the 2011 flood, you both were through both that one and the 2019. What are some of the differences that you might have experienced with those?
I think there are three real big differences that come to mind. The first is the duration. This year was more typical in most areas of the state that the water came in, it crested, and it receded in a fairly short period of time. Now, there's some areas that still have a lot of flood water there, but for the most part, this is more typical. The second thing was the area that was affected. In 2011, we had a fairly narrow corridor along the Missouri River that had devastating damage, but outside of that corridor, there wasn't a lot of damage. And then the third thing is the time of year, that actually 2011 was more typical, being during the spring and summer, although it lasted for 3 months, whereas this year that it happened early in the year, not the time we typically see flooding.
All right, Kathleen, any differences that you saw also?
I would add to that a lot of trees and shrubs are dormant when these things hit this March, which is a boon because those kind of things, if it's fully growing and in active growth phase when those kind of floodwaters hit, it has a more devastating effect.
All right, so a positive in one sense.
A small one.
If we can consider it that way.
Yeah.
So this, of course, the flood left behind all sorts of debris and sand and silt and contaminants. And, main questions as people are either getting ready to farm or getting ready to garden is what can they do about it and when and how?
We typically, as I work particularly with farmers on crop ground, we kind of group the debris into three groups. We have the sand and sediment, we have the organic debris, corn stalks, trees, branches, and then we have everything else that could be anything from propane tanks to plastic jugs to lumber to anything else that might float down the river. So we need to handle each one a little bit different.
How would they handle, what should people do? Do they dig it up? Does depth matter? Does distance to get rid of it matter?
For trees and shrubs, it absolutely matters. So trees and shrubs, their roots occupy primarily the top 18 inches or so of soil. And that's intentional on the plant's part because that's where oxygen is most available to roots. And so when we put debris on top of the ground, then we put these lowest roots further away from their oxygen source. And so that's a big deal. And so for trees and shrubs, that material really should be taken away.
Okay, and that debris, some of the footage is just terrible on the kinds of contaminants, perhaps? What happens there?
It just depends on what happened to be upstream. There's no way of really predicting what kind of contaminants might have come in with the floodwaters, so we just have to assume the worst and take necessary precautions. One thing I might add on the debris there, especially if there's sand or sediment, a lot of times this is a coarser textured material, and people might say, well, soil is soil, but it really isn't. That we need to get back close to that original native soil that was there, and if we leave a couple inches of sand or sediment out there, we need to incorporate that in. But we don't want to leave a layer of material that's a different texture than the soil below, because that will affect infiltration. It'll affect the rooting of the plants. So we want to incorporate, remove what we need to, and then incorporate the rest.
So is there a depth in a particular, will rototilling do it for the gardens, or are we chiseling or disking? And is it 6 inches of sand or 12 inches?
Well, what we normally recommend is whatever level of sediment you have on top of the soil, that you till 1.5 times that into the native soil below. So if you have 2 inches of sand on top, you need to go another 3 inches. So you need to be tilling a total of 5 inches deep, the 2 inches of deposited material, and then 1.5 times that, or 3 inches, into the soil below.
So in raised beds, we had some raised beds, Kathleen, or some questions about raised beds that were flooded. And as the water is receding, do people need to do the same thing? Do they need to get that soil out of those raised beds?
Yeah, so anytime you have a raised bed, you need a little bit of something called headspace. That's a little bit of area where, when you're watering that garden, that it doesn't immediately spill over the sides. And if you have too much of that material, if it's as high as the sides of the bed, you're not going to have any headspace at all. It's going to be really difficult to water those areas. So from a practical standpoint of watering, yeah, you need to get some of that taken away. But in addition to having excess soil around in a vegetable garden area, the concern there is, what do you do with all that material, you know? And if you don't want the task of having to do anything with that stuff, you can till it in. But if it's a concern and it needs to come out, then that's certainly something that people can do. But there's very few places you can take that. It either has to go to a sanitary landfill, or in some cases, it can be used in construction. So you can check with local construction companies and see if they can use it as backfill for something.
Well, and, you know, we've heard reports of, you know, 100 dump trucks of material out of a single location, which of course is an awful lot of material to get rid of, whether it's, you know, a farm or along the river or those kinds of things. So should people have their soil tested? We're getting that question as well. And if so, where? And then what happens if you discover something that you really don't want to know that you've got in that soil?
Yeah, I know, as far as what we tell people is, you know, don't bother, because you don't know what the floodwaters carry. And if you don't know and you ask the soil testing company to test for every possible thing that you would have to be tested for, it would soon outweigh the cost. The cost of doing it would outweigh doing it. So it just simply makes sense to assume everything is there, all of those contaminants. So E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella for the human-borne pathogens, and then the other things like oils and grease and things like that for machinery, and then any kind of pesticides residues could be washed into those sites as well. It's just easier to assume those things, and then you can take proactive measures so that you can grow vegetables on those sites so that you don't have to worry about food safety issues.
Good. And is it the same sort of on the acreage or maybe the small farm, John, or those kinds of conditions? Is it kind of the same set of recommendations?
Pretty much the same. One other option that some of those places have is, if it's a large enough area, quite often they will have eroded areas as well as places where there's been deposition of sand and silt. And what we recommend in those, you know, it's not unusual to have a gully 10 foot deep. Well, what we would recommend is, if you have these depositions in other places, fill them within about 2 to 3 feet of the soil surface, and then borrow topsoil from other areas on the farm or acreage, fill in that last area so it's more typical of the soil, but it can be used for fill in the bottom of those eroded areas.
That's a good suggestion, John. You know, we're live on Facebook, so tell your friends, tell us what you think about this particular opportunity for us to dig a little deeper, because of course on Backyard Farmer, we have just these little bitty segments, and oftentimes we leave the show thinking we really should have given people a little bit more information. So let us know what you think. We'd love to hear and have all your friends join and watch us too. Okay, so you mentioned edibles and an edible garden, And we are getting that question as well, of course. What are we telling people about planting and harvesting?
Right. So the research that we're basing this on is what's been done for the National Organic Program by the USDA. And in that, they have come up with two numbers, 90 days and 120 days. So 90 days refers to those vegetables, so from when the floodwaters receded to when you can harvest that first vegetable is 90 days for those things that are not in direct contact with the soil. And so things like green beans, peppers, eggplant, tomatoes, if they're staked, make a big difference.
Right.
And then 120 days for those vegetables that are in direct contact. So if your cucumbers aren't trellised, they're on the ground, then that's 120 days. So that may not be a doable thing. We are telling people that they can plant into those soils before that 90 or 120 days is up. That's not the issue. It's the point of harvest. So 90 days from when the floodwaters receded to when you can actually harvest something.
So in some parts of the state, that will mean probably no planting, because I know there are some areas that are still underwater, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big issue, yeah.
So John, you know, we've had an interesting suggestion that perhaps in some of the areas that are really sand, I mean, they are 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet of sand. Is it possible to do something like plant native grasses in those, see whether they will actually root down into the sand, obviously a sand mix, and then use that either as a cover crop or ultimately into CRP? Does that make sense?
Well, a couple of things here. Yes, you can plant, you can actually plant anything into the sand, realizing that that will have no soil structure. That was one of the big things we saw out of 2011, is there was no soil structure left after it was flooded or when we had depositions. The other is the texture, with most of this being coarse material, sand and coarse silt. It's going to have a much lower water holding capacity, as well as that it won't have organic matter in there. So you're kind of starting from scratch. If your intention is to not remove the sand, silt at all, that if you had the opportunity to incorporate organic matter into it, depending on the size of the area, compost, in our case, a lot of larger fields, that manure from feedlots was a prized commodity that they could add back into that to help build the structure and build up the organic matter was good. Now, if they're just looking at it as a temporary cover, probably wouldn't go with the native grasses, because the cost is going to be fairly high on those. That if we just want to build the organic matter, stabilize it, some of the small grains would probably be better. Oats would establish as quickly, and that might be a possibility there. The other thing you mentioned, CRP, one thing they would need to do would be to check with their local USDA center to see if the ground would even qualify for CRP. They have stipulations on what can or can't be seeded for CRP use.
All right, good point. And actually, you mentioned something without saying the words cover crop, but we will be doing a Digging Deeper in 2 or 3 weeks on cover crops, both for larger areas or acreages, and certainly for gardens, because that's a great way to amend the soil. And of course, we have always called manure in most great composted forms that sort of black gold, that and compost together. So keep those cows eating and pooping, I guess, is about the best thing you can say about that. So as we move closer into actually really spring now, and then into summer, what's really the best piece of advice each of you would give to your clients or our viewers on Facebook?
I would say probably first and foremost is that, you know, we may miss out on some of our spring crops, you know, the early things that we really like to do, like peas and spinach and lettuces and those kind of things. But there's no reason why we couldn't do a fall crop on those. And so, and then for the 90-day things, you know, early, I mean, easily tomatoes will be something we could probably grow and be at that right 90-day mark. My big concern is that there's a lot of foragers out there, people who like to get morels, or they know a wild planting of asparagus or something like that. And those people really need to be cognizant of what's around them when they're gathering from those places, because if there's corn stalks and other debris that's caught high up in fences or high up around in the trees in those areas, that's a pretty clear point that it was flooded in that area, and they wouldn't want to gather things from those spots.
Right, even no matter how much soap you put in them as you're trying to wash, probably.
Yeah, I mean, you can't wash things enough to get them clean enough in order to make them edible and make them safe to eat.
Okay, good. And how about you, John? Good piece of advice.
Well, I think one thing that's important to point out, for most areas that we're probably 45 days into 45 days into that 90 or 120-day waiting period, because most areas by 20th, 25th of March, the floodwaters had subsided. So I think it's important to remember that that's from when the floodwaters receded is when that clock starts on the waiting periods. I guess the piece of advice I would leave is for people that have garden areas that were flooded, have a lot of depositions there, whether it's sand or silt or corn stalks. That was probably my #1 call this year, not only on farms but in towns and what you could do with those. I would encourage people as much as they can to remove those. Now, if they have a large number of corn stalks, if their community has an area where they recycle grass clippings, corn stalks would be great to mix in with those in their composting process there, or they could do it at home if they're doing it, if they have the area and facilities to do that. I would try and get off as much of the sediment that might have been deposited there, get down as close to that layer of native parent soil that was underneath the debris or the depositions, and then incorporate what they can't remove to try and get that back into as normal a condition as they can.
You know, and I did hear, actually talking to a colleague, that the piles of corn stalks, depending on where you are, can be burned with a burn permit. And one of the interesting comments also was there's a lot of sand associated with the stalks. So what happens to the sand if you burn the corn stalks? Sort of an interesting question, really. And I assume the sand does not catch fire and falls to the bottom.
It just filters down through. In some of our deeper corn stalk depositions, we have farmers that have burned them twice, maybe 3 times already, because if you've got 2 feet of corn stalks, that top 6 inches or so is going to be dry, and once you dig past that, it's the corn stalks are still wet. You've got a lot of sand in there. Any rains hasn't washed that sand off. They're not as likely to burn, so they burn it, wait for it to get rained on, wash the ash off, wash the sand or sediment off, and wait for the next layer to dry, and then burn it a second time, maybe a third time, to get rid of that those deep depositions. All
right. Well, thanks, John and Kathleen, for pretty good advice and good information and a good conversation. And of course, we always direct people to flood.unl.edu or to your local extension office for the absolute best up-to-date advice, and Extension is doing a great job with that. That is unfortunately all the time we have for Digging Deeper with Backyard Farmer. You can watch a new Digging Deeper on Facebook every Sunday night at 6:30 p.m. Central, and do not miss Backyard Farmer Live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central on NET. So thanks for digging deeper with Backyard Farmer.